And I think the first step we need to do with this is to cross out my name on it. It'll be successful if we do that. So if you receive one, just cross out the name, Peter Linebaugh, and that way we can, it might be easier to revise it or keep what's useful and toss out what's not. We don't need to do that now particularly. Right? But what I'm trying to do here is, I like what Dorothy said earlier. She spoke about, Dorothy, what did you say? Analysis, that was one thing. Oh, documentation, analysis, and then she talked about circulation. I'm getting into the circulation mode. That is, I want to talk about commoning, and I want to talk about the overthrow of capitalism out on the street corner and wherever I can. And I want to do it in a language, Raj, that is useful, helpful, down to earth, and on the street. If there's by the way, if there's a difficulty, people aren't afraid of difficulty if they know it's important. We can deal with that. It was in that spirit that I agreed to Al Haber when he asked me to write this. But again, I want to say, I don't think it's certainly not the voice of Midnight Notes, but it might be something that could be helpful for us. Certainly, it's needed. And whether this or something else, when I say needed, that discussion of the commons is going to become, it's only becoming more and more common. So let's take it. That's my view. And that's what I hope we can do out of this gathering. And okay. Thank you.
I'm all for the circulation mode of the idea of commoning. And it's the kind of few thoughts I want to share with you here have got to do with that. Is what type of circulation mode, which kind of precedes the kind of question of how to do it. It's not a question of just of language to be used, and I know that often I am guilty of a language that, in my own work, that is intelligible maybe only to me, but not immediately in communication with others, and then it is not just me, other people also. It's a work that we've got to do in common to help one another to clarify. But especially it's also a question of a language that, however clear, I think has got to keep, and this is really what I think would distinguish our discourse of commons, to put in quote, is our others' discourse of commons, and maintain at the same time both the question of constitution of alternatives here and now, commoning, which increase our independence and autonomy from capital circuits. So commoning that are nurturing the bodies and the communities that we share, we form, but on the other side, recognizing the front line, because we're facing a social force which is capital that will use this crisis in whatever way is possible to fracture, defragment, decompose whatever level of compositions and struggles we will be able to generate. So ultimately, going back to the question of discussion of alternatives, there are two broad reasons for the difficulty in going beyond capitalism as a subsystem for the reproduction of our livelihoods. One is the question of the prison, the repression that you mentioned, the violence, the growing securitization, in whatever shape that takes in our times. And the other one is obviously linked to this, is the people increasing dependence on capital loops, circuits, for their reproduction of their livelihoods, for our livelihoods. And this in turn implies the formation, to a large extent, of a subjectivity which is practically minded to its own coupling to capital circuits. So it's a question of really, I recognize this every time I have to go to a market. I use a rationality on the market, or selling my own labor, or dealing with, as a customer or whatever, is a rationality and a value system that also constitute us as a subject of the markets. It's not just the market out there, or the capitalist market out there. We are constituting it. And to a large extent, this is how we recreate our livelihoods. We do this to a large extent, and that's another important point, I think, that we need to keep firm in our differentiation from other, I think, tendencies of Marxist traditions or whatever. This is not supposed to generate some claustrophobia, because capitalism is a subsystem. It's not the system, it's a subsystem. We, in the reproduction of our livelihoods, we are coupled to a variety of circuits. We are part of other circuits, many of which do not have anything to do with capital, or with that value or that value systems, those values practices, or those rationalities. So anyway, the point is that any serious discourse on alternatives must somehow deal with the question of repression and state, and the questions of our dependence on capital circuits. This is, now, if you look at the last, these two issues, actually, is what we can call the front line, the front line of the class struggle. This is, to me, what. In the last 30 years, in the last 15, 20 years, there has been, since the beginning of neoliberalism, in fact, there's been a growing struggles documented, midnight comrades in one sense, but many others, struggles against enclosures and struggles for commons. Struggles against enclosures of neoliberalism, and in fact attempt to constitute new commons in a variety of other ways. At the same time, there has been a growing emergence of the discourse, increasing visibility of the discourse on commons, which in fact ended up with the awarding of the Nobel Prize to Elinor Ostrom. The first time, this is a quite significant fact. When I studied economics, did my PhD in economics in Utah, I remember the joke was that they never give a Nobel Prize to a woman, first of all, and they never gave a Nobel Prize to a non-mainstream economist. That was when I did my PhD in the mid-late 80s. That was the joke among economists. Now, 20 years later, we have a woman, and we have a political scientist, a non-economist, whose main work is about commons. There is no time to discuss this, what's the rationality of it, but it is significant. And to me, the significance of it is not so much in terms of doing honor to kind of our own desires, but also open up the question of cooptation, the danger of cooptation. Why is it there's so much interest on the commons at this moment in the crisis? Okay.